Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to answer some viewers' questions. I try to do this about once a week. It gets a little bit longer than that from time to time, but that doesn't mean that the questions stop coming. And it doesn't mean that I don't provide the answers to those questions to those viewers in a timely manner. I do. If you leave questions in the comment section, I do try to answer them the next day. Try to guide you along, answer your questions so that you can get your reels out there fishing again. What these segments are designed to do is to take the questions that have some tips, have some common problems to them, or just generally I find interesting. And if I can pass those along to a greater audience, then yeah, we're going to do that. So the first question comes in, interestingly enough, about reel design. And the question came in and it was asked, I have a fishing reel. I have two different fishing reels. One of them, the spool winds counterclockwise, and on the other one, it winds clockwise. That's something maybe we never even pay attention to, right? But in this case, you can see as I turn the handle, it's a clockwise wind. And on this one, it's a cardinal 353, and it's going counterclockwise. Well, the second question is going to make it interesting, but the first one was, is this a reel that's a left-handed reel? Well, it could be. A lot of times manufacturers did use an odd number on their fishing reel to designate it as a left hand, or a reel for left hands, but it's actually cranked from the right hand side. Why is that? Spinning reels, typically they say your dominant hand should be controlling the rod, and anything below the rod you should be cranking with your non-dominant hand. So even though your reel is set up to turn with your right hand, they call it a left-handed reel. Go figure, right? All right. Early on, manufacturers did use odd numbers to designate that as a right-hand crank, and even numbers to designate that as a left-hand crank. And you can see that in the Mitchell line for sure. You have a Mitchell 300 and a 301, a Mitchell 302, crank with your left hand, Mitchell 303, crank with your right hand. But then they started making interchangeable hands. So you can simply change out. In this case, this appears to be stuck, but let's see if this one's any more cooperative. They made it easy for you to switch it. That way they didn't have to make two models. They only had to make the one and tell you could go ahead and reverse the handle if you want to crank it with your right hand versus your left hand. Now, the left hand crank is the most dominant of the reels. I think, if I recall, about 90% of the reels made for a particular model are left-hand cranks, not right-handed cranks. I don't know what the general population is in terms of left-hand versus right-hand individuals, but if you were so inclined, you can just switch it over like I did here. That's going to enable you to crank from the right side. But back to the question, was that specifically designed that way? I don't have the answer, and I've told you many times, if I don't have the answer, I'm simply going to tell you I don't know the answer to that. But since this one is on what would have been designed or designated as an odd numbered reel, which might mean that it is a reel for left-handers cranking with their right hand. Boy, I'll get this confused yet. It may be the case. Now, where would that make a difference? The primary place it would make a difference is with an auto trip, one of those easy cast reels with the levers, because they do slightly offset themselves so that you can grab that with your index finger to trip the cast. So it would make sense if you did reverse that for that reason. All right, well, we're going to say that one's unsolved, but it appears to be that there is a reverse turn, or counterclockwise versus clockwise, on reels that were specifically designed. I'm going to follow that up. I'm going to go find a few 401s or 403s or something like that, or the 309, whatever it is, and I'm going to see if it actually holds true. But thank you for the question. It's always thought-provoking, and well, I kind of like that stuff. So thank you. All right, next question came up then. How do I put spinning line on spinning reels? Boy, if this isn't something that always has driven me nuts. They said, I'm putting it on and I get all of the bird's nesting or wind knots in the line itself. Well, if you go to manuals, a lot of times the answer to that in a fishing reel manual is there. It says whatever the direction is of the line that is accumulating on your reel, whatever way that's turning is the way that you put the line. Now that kind of makes sense. If it's gathering this way, find the reel that's gathering that way. That would be, in this case, this way. Put the line down and gather the line this way. Why do you do that? Because monofilament has memory to it, and if you go against the pattern, that is, if you bring it up this way, it's going to twist in an off-on pattern that's going to create wind knots. Now, a lot of times I've seen on the internet, everybody seems to have an answer. On the internet, what it says is, most of the time the line is designed so that if you put the label of the line facing up, it should spool properly. And, well, that's probably right 90% of the time if indeed you've got a reel that has got a clockwise wind to it. Do that on this, you're going to get wind knots, right? What I can say for certain is the way not to do this. The way not to do this is to put a pencil or a screwdriver or a dowel pin or something like that, clamp it into a vise and line it off like this. That will almost certainly guarantee that regardless of whether the line is being collected counterclockwise or clockwise, that you're going to have a problem. Now, where is this appropriate? This is appropriate for bait casters. On a bait casting reel, it doesn't deal with the line being spun by the piece or the rotor. It gets done by the spool spinning. Can we mess this up? Yeah, you can mess this up. So be careful when you go to do this. If you have a bait casting reel, set your line in so that it is spooling over the top. In this case, I know the line's hard to see. In this case, when you bring this tag end up, turn it so that the gathering of the line is a smooth transition from spool to reel. Where do you mess it up? I've seen this done way too many times. Put it on the bottom. The line coming out this way and then going up over the post and being accumulated this way. What's it doing? It's creating a figure 8. When it creates the figure 8, you're going to get that counter memory, and you're going to get curls in your line when you're casting or when it's accumulating. So the answer to this one is this is appropriate for conventional or bait casting reels, but make certain as you do this, it's line off on the top to line on top of the arbor of the spool. That will prevent the curling of the line somewhere down the stream. Very interesting. Okay, one more on line while we're at it. I try to keep these episodes short, and this one would be appropriate. A fellow called in and said, I've got a Penn reel. So do I. I have a Penn Fierce here. This one is the Fierce. It's the first edition of the Fierce, and I believe this is the 8000. This is a Penn Fierce 8000. And I have coning going on. And the question is, what's going on with the reel? Why is it coning below? Normally, when you have a reel like this, a Penn, in the Fierce, the Battle, or the Pursuit series, you do not have the shim washers underneath. Now, Penn doesn't use a series of shim washers on some reels. Shimano, for example, you may get 3 or 4 or 5 shim washers in there. In Penn's case, they have a single Teflon washer that seats below the spool. Now, in this case, this one appears to be incorrect. seems to be floating around there. Looks like it's elongated and worn. So this one definitely needs replacement. But this one, that's thin. And if you've got line on your spool that's gathering to the bottom, it means your spool's riding too high. That says this washer should be removed. Well, you don't remove the washer on that one. You can look on the back side of this, but I think that's proper in terms of the rubber grommet there. Possibly not. But regardless, that should be gathering to the upside, if anything, with a very thin washer. It should be gathering up here. The way to improve, if it's gathering up here and dropping it down, you raise the spool by adding shim washers. In this case, you can't take the one washer out that it is, so you have to look somewhere else for what is the issue. And if you know these reels, the looking somewhere else is in this bail wire. This bail wire has been bent down. And what that means is even at the top of the stroke, which is where it's at now, at the top of the stroke, it's still not reaching up. This bail wire should be seated like this. And that will improve the cant of the line coming off the line roller, and it should reach the top. So there's more than one cause to it. The correction here really is that this needs to be moved up. You can see how that would change the leveling of the spool. That should fix that problem. So what I need to do on this particular reel, replace this, and then I'll probably take a look at the bail structure. This is kind of wonky here, right? I'm holding this firm, and you can see how this has got a lot of movement in it. I would attribute that to a broken bail, and I think what's happening there is the line is never being pulled up properly, causing that to gather. If that was not the answer, then the next thing you would want to do is check for play in your axle shaft. Sometimes there's a connection down here in the gearbox where the axle shaft connects with the crosswind block. That's held in by a Phillips head screw, kind of a flat-headed screw. If that shakes loose because of vibration, you get excessive play up and down on your axle shaft. Doesn't appear to be the case here. You get excessive play up and down, and that can attribute to either a figure 8 kind of a mess up on the line on a reel like this, or it can gather high or gather low depending on how that thing is tracking. But again, if I'm holding this arm of the bail wire still, and I've got the play in the bail wire on this side, that's not right. So that needs to be fixed. So I think what we'll do is we'll do two things to correct this reel. First one is an examination of what's going on inside here. It's probably that this is broken loose on the wire here, and that it needs to be corrected in order to correct this. Well, again, I wanted to keep these exercises short. The 3 questions that we answered are very relevant. It's about the design of the reels, clockwise versus counterclockwise on the spooling, a little bit about how to line the reel, and a little bit about what causes line to accumulate high or low. One final word on this. You know, I'm never quite right all the time, surprise, in terms of getting this. What I do is I put this on a pole, lay my spool down, line it up the way I think it should go, and start spooling the reel. About 10 strokes or 15 strokes, revolutions in, I look. If I've got a tangle going on, something like this gathering up top, I don't know if you can see that, but something like that gathering up top, which is already showing the curly cues on it, I know I've got the spool upside down. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of back it off or cut it off. I'll reverse the spool, and I'll reline that way. So take a visual check, regardless of what you think the direction should be. Take a visual check, about 10 or 12 revolutions in when you're gathering that line. Take, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of thing. Look up top. If it's not going in straight, if you've got something like this going on, then by all means turn around, take this off, take this, back that off, turn your spool upside down, re-spool, and I think you'll find that it spools properly. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. Before I leave, I want to thank our first responders for all they do. I appreciate day in and day out your public service and dedication to task. I want to thank everybody for watching. Keep those questions coming. We will see what we can do to get those answers to you immediately. And if they have a broader appeal, we'll just kind of stack them up as we did here, give out some answers, and hopefully pass that knowledge on to more members of the community. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.